Hey guys, tonight we're dropping you straight into the grimy heart of the Middle Ages, where survival's a daily gamble and comfort's a fairy tale. Picture this, you're sprawled on a lumpy straw mattress, the air thick with the stench of mildew and last night's cabbage stew. A rooster screeches outside, sounding like it's personally offended by dawn. Your modern sensibilities? Useless. One wrong move here, and you're probably not surviving the day. Sorry, but that's the medieval deal. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe cover with blanket for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink awake, eyes crusty, body aching like you've been tossed in a cart and rattled over cobblestones. The room, if you can call it that, is a dim, smoky box of wattle and daub. Walls smeared with mud and straw that look one good rain from collapsing. Your bed is a pile of straw stuffed in a sack, poking through the threadbare blanket like tiny medieval pitchforks. Somewhere in the corner, a drip of water plinks into a puddle, keeping time with your pounding headache. You sniff the air and regret it instantly. Damp earth, sour sweat, and a whiff of something that might be dinner or despair. Welcome to your new life as a 14th century peasant. Let's talk mainstream history. Most folks in the Middle Ages were serfs, tied to the land and working for a lord who owned everything, including their time. You're not free to pack up and chase dreams. Your world is this village, maybe a few muddy acres, and a lifetime of backbreaking labor. Historians estimate 80–90% of Europe's population lived like this, scratching out survival while lords and kings played chess with their lives. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some peasants used to sleep sitting up, propped against walls, because lying flat was thought to invite death. You know, because only corpses lie down. Imagine trying to catch a nap like you're posing for a grumpy cat meme. You roll off the mattress, straw sticking to your hair, and your bare feet hit the dirt floor. It's cold, gritty, and suspiciously squishy in spots. You glance around for shoes and find a pair of leather scraps tied with twine. Think less sneakers, more sad burrito wrappers. Your stomach growls, but breakfast is a distant dream. First, you've got to figure out how to not freeze, starve, or accidentally anger someone with a sword today. The door, a rickety slab of wood, creaks as you push it open. Outside, the village is stirring. A dog barks, a cartwheel squeaks, and someone's shouting about a lost pig. The sky's a bruised gray, promising rain to make your day even soggier. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had any real sense of personal freedom, or if they were too busy surviving to care. Some say the rigid feudal system crushed individuality. Others think small acts of defiance, like sneaking an extra turnip, were their way of sticking it to the man. For now, you're just trying to stand upright without slipping in whatever's oozing underfoot. You take a deep breath, big mistake, that smell's not going anywhere, and step into the morning. Your clothes, a rough tunic and hose, are already itching like they've got a personal vendetta. Joke number one, you thought your Wi-Fi dropping was a crisis? Try waking up to a world where indoor plumbing is a bucket and a prayer. The village is a cluster of hovels like yours, leaning against each other like drunk friends after a tavern brawl. Smoke curls from chimneys, carrying the scent of burning wood and desperation. A neighbor, face like a weathered potato, nods at you, but his eyes say, "Don't ask me for anything." You're not sure if he's friend or foe, but in this world, trust is a luxury you can't afford. Your first task is to check the fire. Last night's embers are barely glowing, and without heat, you're one shiver away from a medieval popsicle. You fumble with a flint, cursing your lack of a lighter. Joke 2, matches haven't been invented yet, so you're basically a caveman with worse hair. As you coax a flame, you realize this is your life now. Every day a gauntlet of hunger, cold, and the vague threat of someone deciding you're a witch. you're not just surviving, you're playing a high-stakes game of don't die before lunch. And lunch? Don't get your hopes up, it's not exactly a drive-through burger. For now, you're focused on not burning your hovel down while you figure out what fresh misery the day has in store. You're standing in your dim hovel, the fire spitting weak sparks as you rub your hands for warmth. The morning's chill clings to you like a bad Tinder date, and your stomach's growling loud enough to wake the neighbors. It's time to hunt for breakfast, but don't expect a cozy cafe with avocado toast. You're in the Middle Ages, where brunch is just a fancy word for whatever hasn't gone furry yet. You glance around the cramped space, eyes scanning for anything edible. A wooden shelf in the corner holds your hopes, and probably some mold. Let's ground this in history. Medieval peasants relied heavily on grain-based foods, like bread or porridge, often made from rye or barley, since wheat was a luxury for the rich. Your daily calorie intake, if you're lucky, might hit 2,000, but it's mostly carbs and grit, literally, since millstones often left tiny bits of stone in the flour. Now for the quirky bit. Some peasants believed eating moldy bread could cure ailments, like a medieval version of just walk it off. Spoiler, it didn't work, but points for optimism. You spot a loaf on the shelf, its crust speckled with green. Do you risk it or keep searching? You shuffle over, bare feet crunching on the dirt floor. Yep, still gross. The loaf feels like a brick, and when you break it open, the inside's more gray than golden. You're no baker, but you're pretty sure bread shouldn't look like it's auditioning for a zombie flick. You sniff it cautiously. It smells like regret and a hint of yeast. Your stomach doesn't care about aesthetics, though. It's screaming for something, anything. You tear off a chunk, brushing off the worst of the fuzz. Joke 1, you thought gluten-free was a struggle? Try survive the mold as a diet plan. But wait, there's movement in the shadows. A rat, bold as a medieval tax collector, darts across the shelf, eyeing your bread like it's his breakfast. You freeze, clutching the loaf. Rats aren't just pests here, they're competition. Historians still argue whether medieval folks saw rats as a nuisance or just part of the furniture. Some say they were so common people barely noticed them. Others think villagers waged constant war against the furry thieves. You're definitely Team Anti-Rat. You wave your arms, shouting, "Not today, buddy!" The rat skitters off, but you know he'll be back with friends. You turn back to the shelf, hoping for a backup plan. There's a small sack of oats, a couple of shriveled onions, and something that might have been cheese in a past life. You grab the oats, figuring porridge is safer than gambling on the mystery dairy. You pour a handful into a chipped clay bowl, then head to the fire. Oh, right, the water's from a bucket you hauled from the well yesterday, and it looks like it's been plotting revenge. You stir the oats, praying the result is edible. Joke 2, you thought instant oatmeal was basic? Try pray it doesn't kill you porridge. As the mixture bubbles, you notice the hovel's getting smokier. Your fire's enthusiasm is outpacing your chimney's competence. You cough, waving a hand to clear the haze. The porridge thickens, looking like glue, but smelling vaguely like survival. You scoop some into your mouth with a wooden spoon. It's gritty, bland, and sticks to your teeth, but it's food. You chew slowly, trying to convince yourself it's not that bad. It's not gourmet, but it's keeping you alive. For now. You're halfway through when you hear a shout outside. The neighbor from earlier, the one with the potato face, is yelling about his missing pig again. You peek through the door crack. He's waving a stick, accusing another villager of stealing it. The accused guy, all beard and no patience, looks ready to throw hands. You duck back inside, not keen on getting dragged into medieval drama. Your breakfast is done, but the day's just starting. You've got fields to work, lords to please, and a whole village of germs to avoid. Joke 3, you thought office politics were rough? Try dodging a pig-related fight before 8 a.m. You rinse your bowl with a splash of water, already dreading the next task. The bread's still there, mocking you with its moldy smirk. You wrap it in a cloth,
hoping it'll be less gross by lunch. Spoiler, it won't. For now, you've survived breakfast, but the Middle Ages aren't done testing you. You grab your cloak, steel yourself, and step outside, wondering what fresh chaos awaits. You step out of your hovel, the morning air slapping you with a damp chill that sneaks under your cloak. Your stomach's barely satisfied from that gritty porridge, and now you've got to face the day looking like you lost a bet with a sheep. It's time to dress for survival in the Middle Ages, where fashion is less runway chic and more, please don't fall apart before spring. You're still in the rough tunic you woke up in, but it's time to layer up, because freezing, itching, and dodging lice are your new hobbies. Let's anchor this in history. Medieval peasant clothing was usually wool or linen, hand-woven and built to last, since replacing it was a rare luxury. Most folks owned 1 or 2 outfits, worn until they disintegrated. Your tunic and hose are standard issue. Think shapeless sack and leggings that sag like your hopes. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some peasants stuffed their shoes with straw for warmth, turning their feet into walking hay bales. It's not exactly Gore-Tex, but it's better than frostbite. You glance down at your leather foot wrappers. Yep, they're as sad as they sound. What's the first thing you grab to stay warm today? You duck back inside, where the fire's down to embers, and rummage through a wooden chest by your straw bed. Inside, there's a wool cloak, heavy and smelling like it's been through a few too many winters. You drape it over your shoulders, wincing as the coarse fibers scrape your neck. It's not cozy. It's like wearing a grumpy hedgehog. You find a pair of wool hose to replace the ones you're wearing, which are starting to look like they're planning an escape. Pulling them on is a workout. Medieval elastic hasn't been invented, so you tie them to your belt with twine. Joke 1, you thought skinny jeans were a hassle? Try keeping your pants up with medieval duct tape. As you adjust the hose, something tickles your arm. You scratch, then freeze. A tiny black speck darts across your sleeve. Lice, of course. These little jerks were the uninvited guests of the Middle Ages, thriving in unwashed clothes and hair. Historians still argue whether people accepted lice as normal or fought them with desperate remedies, like smearing themselves with pig fat, because nothing says pest control like smelling like bacon. You flick the louse away, but you know it's got friends. You consider changing tunics, but the spare in the chest looks equally suspect. Do you risk it, or just accept your new roommates? You stick with the tunic you've got, muttering about how your old life's dry cleaner would have retired in shame here. You grab a leather belt, cinching it to keep your layers from staging a revolt. There's a small pouch tied to it, holding your worldly wealth, 3 copper coins, and a smooth stone you keep for luck. You slip on a wool cap, hoping it'll keep your head warm and maybe discourage the lice from throwing a party. Your shoes, those leather scraps, get a quick check. They're holding together, barely, but you stuff some straw inside for extra insulation. It's prickly, but it might keep your toes from turning blue. Outside, the village is buzzing now. A woman trudges by, her own cloak patched like a medieval quilt, balancing a basket of turnips. She gives you a look that says, "Don't talk to me before my ale." You nod, keeping your distance. Your outfit's complete, but you're already itching like you've rolled in a nettle patch. Joke 2, you thought fast fashion was bad? Try wearing the same outfit until it qualifies as an ecosystem. You take a step and feel the ground squish. Mud's already seeping through your shoes. Great. You're dressed, but you're one stiff breeze from regretting every life choice. The fields are waiting, and so's the Lord who expects you to plow them. You adjust your cloak, scratch another itch, and trudge forward, praying your clothes hold up longer than your patience. Joke 3, you thought laundry day was a chore? Here, it's a biannual event, and the detergent? Just hope. You're trudging through the village, your wool cloak dragging in the mud like it's trying to escape back to the sheep. The itch from your lice-infested tunic, remember those uninvited guests, is a constant reminder that medieval life is a full-body endurance test. Now it's time to face the fields, where you'll spend the day wrestling with tools that seem designed to mock your modern hands. The sun's barely up, but the air's already thick with the scent of damp earth and manure. Welcome to your new job, peasant farmer, where the pay is non-existent and the benefits are surviving until dinner. Let's root this in history. Agriculture was the backbone of medieval Europe, with most peasants working communal fields under the open field system. You'd plow, sow, and harvest crops like barley or rye, sharing tools and oxen with the village. Yields were low, about 1 bushel of grain for every bushel planted, meaning starvation was always one bad harvest away. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some farmers believed planting during a full moon boosted crops, a superstition that had them squinting at the sky like medieval meteorologists. You're headed to the fields now, but what tool do you grab first? A plow, a hoe, or just your raw determination? You reach the village's edge, where the fields stretch out like a patchwork of brown and green, scarred by furrows. A wooden plow, heavy and splintered, leans against a fence. It's not the shiny tractor you're used to. It's a clunky beast that needs an ox to drag it, and you to wrestle it through the dirt. You spot the village ox, a lumbering creature with eyes that say, "I'm over this too." You loop a rope yoke over its shoulders, muttering apologies for the early start. The ox snorts, unimpressed. Joke 1, you thought rush hour traffic was bad? Try convincing a 2,000-pound coworker to clock in. You grip the plow's handles, which feel like they were carved by someone who hated hands. The ox lurches forward, and you stumble, the plow blade catching on rocks and roots. The soil's heavy, clotted with clay, and every step feels like you're arm wrestling the earth itself. Your back's screaming already, and you've barely carved a furrow. Other villagers are out too, bent over their own patches, their grunts and curses blending with the squawk of crows overhead. One guy, face like a sunburned walnut, shouts, "Keep it straight, newbie!" You force a smile, wondering if medieval HR handles workplace sass. Historians still argue whether peasants felt pride in their labor or just resentment toward the lords who took most of their crops. Some say the rhythm of farming gave life structure. Others think it was soul-crushing drudgery. You're leaning toward the latter as the plow jams again, sending a jolt up your arms. You pause, wiping sweat from your brow, and notice your straw-stuffed shoes, yup, still prickly, are now caked in mud. Joke 2, you thought gym memberships were tough? Try plowing a field for the cardio of a lifetime. The ox stops to chew a weed, and you don't have the heart to argue. You glance at the sky. Gray, of course, because the Middle Ages don't do pleasant. You're supposed to plant rye today, but the seed sack's back at the village, and fetching it means another muddy trek. You sigh, wondering if that moldy bread from breakfast, remember that loaf, is starting to look gourmet. The day's young, but you're already dreaming of a break. Too bad breaks haven't been invented yet. You nudge the ox, grit your teeth, and push on, the plow scraping like it's laughing at you. By noon, your hands are blistered, and the furrows still wonky. The walnut-faced guy trudges over, offering a swig of ale from a leather flask. You take it, grateful, even though it tastes like fermented regret. He mutters about the Lord's tithe. Half your harvest goes to him, no questions asked. You nod, too tired to rant. Joke 3, you thought taxes were steep? Try forking over your lunch to a guy with a castle. The field's only half plowed, and the day's not done. You grip the plow again, wondering how anyone survived this grind. You're staggering back from the fields, hands blistered from that cursed plow. Remember its vendetta against straight lines? Mud clings to your shoes, and your cloak so heavy with damp it might as well be armor. The village looms ahead, a huddle of smoky hovels, but the air's got a new edge. A sharp, hacking cough echoes from somewhere close. Your heart sinks. It's not just a cold. In the Middle Ages, a cough could be the Black Death knocking. You're about to spend your afternoon dodging plague-ridden villagers, praying you don't catch the grim handshake of death. Let's ground this in history. The Black Death, peaking around 1347 to 1351, wiped out 30 to 50% of Europe's population, spreading through fleas on rats. Yup, like that breakfast-stealing rat from earlier. Villages like yours were petri dishes, with cramped quarters and zero sanitation. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some folks thought carrying posies or burning herbs could ward off the plague, leading to pockets stuffed with flowers and streets smelling like a bad potpourri shop. You're weaving through the village now, eyes darting for anyone looking too sweaty or spotty. What's your first move to stay safe? Avoid people, sniff out some herbs, or just run? You pull your cloak tighter, as if wool could block a pandemic, and pick up your pace. The main path is busy. A woman hauls a water bucket, a kid chases a scrawny chicken, and an old man coughs into his sleeve, each hack making you flinch. You swerve wide, nearly tripping into a ditch. Your modern brain's screaming social distancing, but good luck explaining that to a villager who thinks personal space is a lord's privilege. Joke 1, you thought mask debates were intense? Try convincing someone to stop breathing your air in 1349. You spot a patch of wild mint growing near a fence and grab a handful, crushing the leaves to release a sharp scent. It's no N95, but it's better than nothing. Plus, it masks the village's usual bouquet of manure and despair. You tuck some in your belt, feeling briefly clever, until you remember the plague doesn't care about your herbal hacks. The coughing man's gone, but now a woman's sneezing near the well, and you're wondering if you should just hold your breath until spring. Historians still argue whether medieval people understood contagion or just blamed bad air. Miasma theory was big, leading to bonfires of stinky clothes that did nothing but make everyone smell like barbecue. You detour down a quieter lane, passing a hovel with a cross painted on the door, a plague house. Your stomach twists. Inside, someone's groaning, and you hurry past, guilt mixing with fear. You're not a hero, you're just trying to not be a statistic. The village feels like a minefield now, every sniffle a potential death sentence. You spot a neighbor, Potato Face from the pig drama, waving you over. He's got a red nose, but no obvious boils, so you approach cautiously. He offers a turnip, saying it's good for humors. You take it, nodding, but you're not eating anything from Cough Central. Your throat's scratchy now. Is it dust, fear, or the plague's opening act? You shove the mint under your nose, inhaling like it's your last hope. Joke 2, you thought seasonal allergies were bad? Try dodging a plague that turns your village into a ghost town. You're almost at your hovel, but the well's on the way, and you need water. Problem is, Sneeze Lady's still there, chatting with a guy who looks one cough from collapse. You weigh your options, thirst or risk. You choose thirst, veering homeward. That bucket of murky water from yesterday, remember its revenge plot, will have to do. You slip inside, bolting the door like it'll keep death out. The fire's dead, but you're too spooked to care. You munch the turnip, its bitter crunch barely food, and try to calm your racing heart. The village is quieter now, or maybe it's your imagination. Joke 3, you thought rush hour crowds were a hassle? Try navigating a plague without a hazmat suit. You're safe for now, but the day's not over, and the Middle Ages love a plot twist. You huddle by the cold hearth, mint in hand, wondering if survival's just a matter of outrunning the fleas.
You're trudging back to your hovel, clutching your market haul, 4 shriveled onions and 2 fish that look like they've already filed for retirement. The village market's noise fades, but the weight of your empty coin pouch, remember those 3 coppers you spent, hangs heavy. Your throat's parched, and that bucket of murky water from yesterday is plotting its revenge. It's time to find something to drink, but in the Middle Ages, clean water's a myth, and the village well's more gamble than guarantee. You're about to learn why ale's the safest bet, even if it tastes like fermented regret. Let's root this in history. Medieval water sources, like wells or rivers, were often contaminated with sewage, animal waste, or worse, making waterborne diseases a constant threat. Most peasants drank weak ale or cider, low-alcohol brews fermented to kill germs, consumed at about a gallon a day per person. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some villages had ale tasters, officials who checked brew quality, often by pouring it on a bench and sitting to see if their pants stuck. Sticky ale meant good sugar content. You're parched and eyeing options now. Do you risk the well, hunt for ale, or just chew an onion for moisture? You veer toward the well, despite Sneeze Lady's lingering presence from your plague-dodging days. The stone rim's slick with moss, and the water below looks like it's been brooding since last week. You lean over, sniffing. Yep, it smells like a wet dog with trust issues. A kid nearby, tossing pebbles into the bucket, grins at you. "Don't drink that," he says, "unless you want the runs." You back off, grateful for the heads up, but annoyed at your options. Joke 1, you thought tap water was sketchy? Try a well that's basically a medieval petri dish. Your next bet's the alehouse, a squat building with a sagging roof and the vibe of a bar fight waiting to happen. You push open the door, and the air hits you, sour hops, sweat, and a hint of spilled dreams. The alewife, a woman with arms like a blacksmith, eyes you as you approach. "Penny for a pint," she grumbles. You pat your empty pouch, realizing your fish and onion deal left you broke. You try bartering an onion, holding it up like it's a rare gem. She laughs, a sound like gravel in a barrel, and says, "Onions don't pour." Joke 2, you thought happy hour was tough? Try bartering veggies for a drink in a world where ale's currency. You're about to slink out when Potato Face, your pig drama neighbor, slaps your shoulder. "On me," he says, tossing a coin to the alewife. You're suspicious, but too thirsty to argue. She hands you a wooden mug filled with cloudy ale, its foam looking like it's planning an escape. You take a sip. Bitter, warm, and gritty, like drinking a bad decision. But it's safer than the well, and your throat stops screaming. Historians still argue whether medieval ale was a dietary staple or just a coping mechanism. Some say it provided calories, others think it was how peasants survived their water supply. You're just glad to not be gambling on diarrhea today. You thank Potato Face, who's already ranting about his missing pig again. You nod, sipping slowly, savoring the ale's faint buzz. Outside, the village hums. Carts creak, someone's hammering, and a dog's barking like it's got a vendetta. You're tempted to stay, but the fields are calling, and your lord doesn't care about your hydration status. You drain the mug, wincing at the aftertaste, and head out, fish and onions still tucked in your belt. Joke 3, you thought coffee runs were life? Try chugging ale just to make it to lunch. Back at your hovel, you set your haul by the dead fire, realizing you'll need to fetch kindling soon. The ale settled your thirst, but it's also made you a bit woozy. Medieval brews hit harder than you'd expect. You're surviving, barely, but the day's still got plenty of traps. For now, you're just glad you didn't drink the well water and join the village's gastrointestinal hall of fame.
You stumble out of the alehouse. The weak ale, remember that gritty pint? Sloshing in your stomach alongside those onions and fish tucked in your belt. The village hums with midday chaos, but a bell tolls, deep and somber, cutting through the noise. It's the church calling everyone to Mass, and in the Middle Ages, skipping is not just rude, it's a one-way ticket to a priest's bad side. You're about to kneel in a chilly chapel, dodging accusations of heresy while trying to blend in. The ale's buzz isn't helping your focus, and your muddy cloaks screaming peasant louder than ever. Let's ground this in history. The Catholic Church dominated medieval life, with Mass held daily and attendance near mandatory for villagers. It wasn't just spiritual. The Church enforced social order, collected tithes, and could brand you a heretic for asking too many questions. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some priests sold indulgences, essentially get-out-of-sin cards, which peasants bought with coins or labor thinking it shaved time off purgatory.
You're trudging toward the church now, hoping to avoid trouble. What's your plan? Keep your head down, fake some piety, or pray you don't sneeze and spark a plague panic? The church looms at the village's heart, a stone building with a crooked steeple and windows too small to let in hope. You join the crowd shuffling inside, your straw-stuffed shoes, still soggy from the fields, squelching on the flagstones. The air's damp, smelling of incense, wax, and unwashed bodies. You find a spot near the back, kneeling on a floor that's colder than your hovel's hearth. The priest, a gaunt man with eyes like a hawk, scans the congregation. You avoid his gaze, remembering stories of folks accused of witchcraft for less than a stray cough. The Mass begins, all Latin chants and droning prayers you barely understand. Your modern brain's begging for subtitles, but you mimic the others, bowing and crossing yourself on cue. Joke 1, you thought long meetings were bad? Try a sermon in a language you don't speak, with eternal damnation as the stakes. The priest's voice rises, railing about sin and obedience. You catch the word heretic and tense. Last week, a woman was shunned for brewing suspicious ale. You're no theologian, but you know questioning the church is like poking a bear with a stick. Historians still argue whether peasants genuinely believed every church teaching or just followed along to avoid trouble. Some say faith was their anchor. Others think fear of excommunication, or worse, kept them in line. You're definitely in the don't make waves camp, especially when the priest glares your way. You're still itchy from those lice in your tunic, remember them? And scratching now feels like a bad idea. You clasp your hands, trying to look devout, but your stomach growls, loud enough to earn a side-eye from a neighbor. Great, now you're the guy disturbing Mass. The priest lifts a chalice, and the crowd murmurs. You're supposed to feel something holy, but you're mostly worried about your fish going bad in your belt. A collection basket passes, and you panic. Your pouch is empty after the market. You drop in a pebble from your luckstone stash, hoping it passes for a coin in the dim light. Joke 2, you thought tithing was steep? Try donating your only rock to avoid a priest's stink eye. The basket moves on, and you exhale, safe for now. Mass drags, your knees aching on the stone. Finally, it ends, and you shuffle out, avoiding the priest's exit line scrutiny. Outside, the air's fresher, but the village feels heavier, like the church's shadow lingers. You're free, but the day's not done. Fields, hunger, and plague risks still wait. Joke 3, you thought Sunday brunch was a commitment? Try daily Mass, where skipping's a sin and the seats are torture. You head home, praying your pebble tithe doesn't come back to haunt you. You're slipping away from the church, the priest's Latin chants still echoing in your head like a medieval earworm. Your knees ache from kneeling on those icy flagstones. Remember that pebble you passed off as a tithe? And your cloak's collecting new mud with every step. The village feels tense, the air sharp with more than just the usual manure tang. You've got to trek through a forest path to fetch kindling for your hovel fire, but whispers of bandits linger like smoke. You're about to tiptoe through the woods, heart pounding, praying you don't meet the wrong kind of company.
Let's anchor this in history. Banditry was a real threat in the Middle Ages, especially in rural areas where forests offered cover for outlaws. Often desperate peasants or deserters turned to crime. Local lords rarely patrolled beyond their castles, leaving paths like yours a free-for-all. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some bandits left calling cards, like carved sticks or knotted ropes, to mark their territory, scaring travelers without a fight. You're clutching a worn stick for kindling now, eyes darting. What's your plan? Stick to the path, move fast, or hide at every rustle? You reach the village's edge, where the path dips into a dense thicket of oak and ash. The trees loom, branches tangling overhead like they're plotting your demise. Your straw-stuffed shoes, still squishy from the fields, crunch on leaves, loud enough to wake half the county. You freeze at a snapping twig, heart hammering. It's just a squirrel, but your modern nerves aren't built for this. Joke 1, you thought rush hour traffic was stressful? Try a commute where the road rage comes with knives. You grip your stick tighter, wishing it were a sword, or at least a decent club.
The path narrows, mud sucking at your feet, and you spot a crude carving on a tree, a notched circle. Your stomach twists. Is it a bandit's mark or just some kid's doodle? You don't stick around to find out, hurrying forward, eyes scanning the shadows. The forest hums, birds, wind, and something that might be footsteps. You're no woodsman, but you know bandits don't send RSVP. Historians still argue whether most bandits were organized gangs or just starving locals taking what they could. Some say they targeted lords, others think peasants like you were easier prey. You're definitely feeling like prey now. A low whistle cuts the air, and you drop behind a bush, heart in your throat. Two figures slink past, maybe 30 yards off. Ragged cloaks, one with a glinting blade. You hold your breath, praying your lice-ridden tunic, still itching, doesn't make you sneeze. They're muttering something about a merchant's cart, and then they're gone, swallowed by the trees. You wait, counting to 10, then 20, before creeping out. Joke 2. You thought dodging spam calls was bad? Try dodging guys who'd rob you for an onion. You start gathering kindling, snatching fallen branches while keeping one eye on the path. Your arms fill fast, dry sticks, a few pine cones, but every rustle makes you jump. You're halfway done when you spot a pile of twigs near a stump, perfect for your fire. Too perfect. You hesitate, remembering tales of traps, bandits leaving bait to lure the greedy. You grab a few sticks and back off, deciding paranoia's your best friend today. Your hovel's waiting, and you're not keen on becoming a forest legend. You turn back, kindling bundled, and pick up your pace. The path feels longer now, the village too far. A crow caws, mocking your nerves, but no blades flash, no footsteps follow. You break into the open, village hovels in sight, and exhale. You've got your kindling, but your nerves are shot, and the day's not over. Joke 3. You thought hiking was adventure? Try foraging where the trail mix comes with a side of terror. You trudge home, ready to coax your fire back to life, hoping the forest stays where it belongs, behind you. You're stumbling back to your hovel, arms full of kindling from that nerve-wracking forest trek. Remember those bandits' shadows. Your cloak soaked with sweat and mud, and the itch from your lice-infested tunic is now a full-blown rebellion. The village air's turning sharp as the sun dips, a reminder that winter's always lurking in the Middle Ages. It's time to huddle by a weak fire, cursing the drafty walls that let the cold sneak in like an uninvited guest. Your hovel's no fortress, and staying warm is a battle you're not winning tonight. Let's ground this in history. Medieval homes, especially peasant hovels, were poorly insulated, often just wattle and daub walls with thatched roofs that leaked in storms. Fire was the only heat source, but fuel was scarce, and chimneys were a luxury. Smoke often just drifted out a hole in the roof. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some peasants slept close to their livestock for warmth, turning their hovels into shared apartments with cows or goats. You're eyeing your fire pit now, kindling in hand. What's your first move? Stack the wood? Pray for a spark? Or just curse the cold?
You kick open your hovel's creaky door, the familiar stink of damp straw and old stew. Remember that moldy bread? Greeting you like a slap. The fire pit's a sad pile of ash, barely warm from this morning. You drop the kindling, wincing as a splinter jabs your blistered hand. Thanks, plow. The room's already chilly, and your breath's starting to fog. You kneel by the pit, arranging sticks like you're building a tiny log cabin. Your flint's in your pouch, next to that lucky stone, minus the pebble, you tithed at church. You strike it, sparks flying, but the kindling's stubborn, like it's auditioning for most frustrating thing today. Joke 1. You thought central heating was a hassle? Try starting a fire with rocks and a bad attitude. The first flame catches, small but defiant, and you blow gently, coaxing it to grow. Smoke stings your eyes, curling up to the roof smoke hole, which, surprise, lets in a draft cold enough to make you shiver. You add pine cones, their crackle a small victory. But the fire's weak, barely warming your hands. Your hovel's walls, thin as medieval promises, whistle with every gust. You drag your straw mattress, still prickly, closer to the fire, hoping to trap some heat. Historians still argue whether peasants adapted to such harsh conditions or just suffered quietly. Some say they were tough as nails. Others think chronic illness was their real harvest. You're leaning towards suffering, especially as a cough tickles your throat. Plague paranoia's back. You wrap your cloak tighter, but it's more holes than wool now. The fish and onions from the market, still in your belt, need cooking, but you're too cold to care. You glance at the door, half expecting a goat to wander in for a cuddle. No such luck. It's just you and the draft. You toss another stick on the fire, cursing when it smokes more than it burns. Joke 2, you thought a chilly office was bad? Try a hovel where the thermostat's a prayer and a stick. Outside, the village is quieting. Folks are hunkering down, same as you. A neighbor's dog howls, probably as cold as you are. You're tempted to check on Potato Face, see if he's got spare wood, but the thought of leaving your fire's feeble glow stops you. You huddle closer, the straw mattress poking your ribs, and try to ignore the chill creeping up your legs. Your straw-stuffed shoes, still damp, aren't helping. You're surviving, but only just, and the night's young. Joke 3, you thought camping was rough? Try living in a fridge with a campfire the size of your dreams. You stare into the flames, wondering how you'll make it to morning without turning into a peasant popsicle. You're crouched by your hovel's feeble fire. Remember that smoky kindling struggle, shivering as the drafty walls mock your attempt to stay warm. The onions and fish from the market, still dangling in your belt like sad trophies, are your next challenge. Hunger's clawing again, and it's time to tackle dinner, which means cooking a mystery stew over a fire that's more attitude than heat. In the Middle Ages, culinary arts is just a fancy way of saying, hope it's not poisonous. You're about to spoon up a broth that might be last week's leftovers, praying it doesn't stage a revolt in your gut. Let's anchor this in history. Medieval peasant diets leaned hard on stews or pottages, a mix of whatever was on hand, grains, vegetables, maybe meat if you were lucky, simmered for hours in a single pot. Most meals were bland, seasoned with herbs at best, since spices were for lords with coin. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some peasants added pottage stones, smooth rocks kept in the pot for years, believed to add flavor or maybe just nostalgia. You're eyeing your clay pot now, fish and onions in hand. What's your first step? Chop, boil, or sniff for spoilers? You grab the onions, their shriveled skins crackling as you peel them on the dirt floor, still gritty from this morning. Your knife, a dull blade that's more rust than steel, makes chopping a workout. Tears stream from the onion's sting, mixing with smoke from the fire, and you're half blind before you're done. You toss the chunks into the pot, hoping they'll soften into something edible. The fish are next, their glassy eyes still judging you. You gut them with a grimace, scales sticking to your fingers, and pray they're fresher than they look. Joke 1, you thought meal kits were work? Try filleting fish with a knife that hates you.
You add water from your bucket. Yep, that murky revenge water you've been avoiding. It's not ideal, but ale's for drinking, not cooking, and the well's still a plague risk. You set the pot over the fire, which spits like it's personally offended. The broth starts to simmer, smelling like fishy regret with a hint of onion. You stir with a wooden spoon, noticing a grayish film forming. Is it scum or just medieval ambiance? You skim it off, muttering about how that moldy bread from breakfast, remember that loaf, is starting to sound gourmet. Historians still argue whether peasant stews were nutritious or just filler. Some say they packed enough calories for labor. Others think they left folks malnourished, scraping by on grit and hope.
You're not feeling nourished as you taste the broth. It's watery, fishy, and slightly bitter, like a soup that's mad at you. You toss in a pinch of wild mint from your plague-dodging stash, hoping it'll mask the flavor. It doesn't. The fire's fading again, so you add another stick, coughing as smoke fills the hovel. Joke 2, you thought takeout was lazy? Try cooking stew where the main ingredient is despair. You sit back, waiting for the stew to improve, but the hovel's cold is creeping in, and your straw mattress, still poking like tiny pitchforks, looks less inviting by the minute. Outside, a neighbor's shouting about a lost cow, but you're too tired to care. The stew's finally bubbling, thick enough to eat, so you ladle some into a chipped bowl. It's not winning any awards, but it's hot, and that's a win. You take a spoonful, wincing at the fishy aftertaste. It's food, technically, and you're too hungry to complain. You're halfway through when a rat, yup, your breakfast buddy, scampers across the floor, eyeing your bowl. You shoo it away, clutching your dinner like it's gold. Joke 3, you thought dining alone was peaceful? Try eating while a rat plans a heist. You finish the stew, scraping the bowl, and set the pot aside, hoping leftovers last till morning. The day's wearing you down, and the Middle Ages aren't letting up. You huddle closer to the fire, wondering what fresh misery tomorrow's cooking up. You're slumped by your hovel's fire, the aftertaste of that fishy stew. Remember that questionable broth? Lingering like a bad decision. The fire's down to embers again, and the cold seeping through your drafty walls, making your lice-ridden tunic, still itching, feel like a personal attack. You're bone-tired from plowing fields and dodging plague, but the village isn't done with you. A shout outside snaps you alert. Someone's in trouble, and in the Middle Ages, trouble often comes with a side of public humiliation. You're about to tiptoe past the village stocks, praying you don't offend the local lord and end up on display. Let's ground this in history. Medieval justice was harsh, with punishments like stocks or pillories used to shame minor offenders. Think thieves, drunks, or anyone who mouthed off to the wrong person. Stocks trapped your ankles, leaving you to sit in the open, mocked or pelted with rotten food by passers-by. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some villages had scold's bridles, metal masks for gossips, forcing silence with a tongue depressor. Ouch. You're heading out now, hoping to stay invisible. What's your move? Avoid the square? Keep quiet? Or pray you're not the next target? You grab your cloak, still damp and heavy, and crack open the door. The village square's just down the path, where a crowd's gathering, their jeers carrying on the wind. You sneak closer, sticking to the shadows of a hovel. The stocks are there, wooden and menacing, holding a man you recognize. Beard guy from the pig drama, the one who nearly threw punches over a stolen sow. He's slumped, ankles locked, face red, as villagers toss cabbage scraps. You wince. That could be you if you step out of line. Joke 1, you thought cancel culture was rough? Try getting canceled with a side of week-old vegetables.
You spot the Lord's bailiff, a wiry man with a sneer, barking orders. He's the Lord's enforcer, and crossing him is like signing up for a starring role in the stocks. You overheard at the market that beard guy disrespected the Lord's steward, probably just argued over taxes. You're no rebel, but you know the rules. Lords own everything, and peasants obey or pay. You duck your head, hoping your existence doesn't annoy anyone important. Historians still argue whether such punishments deterred crime or just entertained the mob. Some say they reinforced order, others think they bred resentment. You're just trying not to be Exhibit A. A woman in the crowd yells, "Thief!" and chucks a turnip, missing beard guy but hitting a stray dog who yelps and bolts. You stifle a laugh, bad move to draw attention. You need to get past the square to check your field's fence. A loose post could let the Lord's sheep ruin your rye. You skirt the edge, keeping your cloak's hood up, but a kid spots you and shouts, "Oi, you next?" Your heart skips.
You shake your head, muttering something about firewood, and hurry on. Joke 2. You thought office gossip was bad? Try dodging a village where kids roast you for sport. You're almost clear when the bailiff's gaze lands on you. He squints, like he's mentally measuring you for the stocks. You freeze, remembering your pebble tithe at church. Could someone have noticed? You nod politely, heart pounding, and he looks away, distracted by a new heckler. You exhale, legs shaky, and keep moving. The square's chaos fades behind you, but the lesson sticks. One wrong word, one missed tax, and you're the village piñata. Joke 3. You thought parking tickets were a pain? Try a punishment where the fine's your dignity and a face full of cabbage. You reach your field, the stock's shadow still looming in your mind. The fence post's loose, but you'll fix it tomorrow. Right now, you just want your hovel's smoky safety. The day's wearing you thin, and the Middle Ages keep raising the stakes. You trudge back, praying the bailiff forgets your face and the stocks stay empty for you. You're hurrying back to your hovel, the jeers from the village stocks, remember Beard Guy's cabbage bath, still ringing in your ears. Your cloak's a soggy mess, and the itch from your lice-infested tunic is now a full-time job. The fire's probably dead again, and the chill's creeping into your bones like it's got a personal invite. Worse, you're starting to smell yourself, and it's not great. In the Middle Ages, bathing's a rare event, and you're about to ponder a yearly dip, wondering if your stench is now your personality. Good luck finding a tub or soap. Let's anchor this in history. Medieval peasants bathed infrequently, often once or twice a year, since clean water was scarce and heating it was a chore. Public bathhouses existed in towns, but villages like yours relied on rivers or buckets, and superstition warned that frequent washing invited illness. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some folks used urine as a cleaning agent, believing its ammonia could scrub clothes or even whiten teeth. Yup, medieval mouthwash was a wild choice. You're standing in your hovel now, sniffing the air. Do you brave a cold splash, hunt for a stream, or just embrace the funk? You glance at your water bucket, still murky, plotting its revenge, and shudder. No way you're dunking yourself in that. The fire's out, as expected, so heating water's a pipe dream anyway. You poke the ashes, half hoping for a miracle spark, but get nothing but a faceful of soot. Your skin's gritty, a mix of field mud, fish scales from that stew, and sweat from dodging bandits and bailiffs. You scratch your scalp. Big mistake. Those lice are throwing a rave. Joke 1. You thought a bad hair day was rough? Try a scalp that's basically a flea circus. You consider the river, a half-mile trek through the forest. Yup, that bandit-infested gauntlet. The water's probably freezing, and you're not keen on skinny dipping with an audience of outlaws or otters. Plus, you've heard whispers about bad humors from wet skin, and you're already paranoid about that cough from Plague Central. You rummage through your chest, hoping for a rag to at least wipe your face. You find a scrap of linen, stiff with age, and give your hands a half-hearted scrub. It's like polishing a rock with a sock. Pointless, but satisfying.
Historians still argue whether medieval hygiene was as bad as we think. Some say peasants kept cleaner than stereotypes suggest, using herbs or ash for makeshift soaps. Others point to records of rampant skin infections and flea-borne diseases. You're team gross right now, especially as you catch another whiff of yourself. You remember that mint from your plague-dodging days and rub a leaf on your neck, hoping it'll mask the smell. It doesn't. You're starting to wonder if the villagers avoid you because of plague fears or just your aroma. Joke 2. You thought deodorant was a must? Try living where your vibe is ode to despair. You're tempted to ask Potato Face for advice. He seems to survive without smelling like a landfill, but the thought of leaving your hovel again feels like signing up for more drama. Instead, you drag your straw mattress, still stabbing like tiny pitchforks, closer to the fire pit, planning to relight it later. For now, you're resigned to your stink. The village is quieting outside, the stock's chaos fading, but you know tomorrow's another gauntlet of mud, hunger, and judgment.
Joke 3, you thought a spa day was luxury? Try dreaming of a bath that doesn't involve frostbite or pee. You huddle up, scratching another itch, and wonder how anyone stayed sane in this filthy grind. You're curled up in your hovel, the stench of your unwashed self, remember that bathing debate? Now a permanent roommate alongside the lice in your tunic. The fire's dead again, and your attempt to ignore the itch and cold is failing spectacularly. A new problem's brewing. Your nose is runny, and your head's throbbing like it's hosting a medieval drum circle. In the Middle Ages, a sniffle isn't just a cold. It's a one-way ticket to a barber surgeon's leech jar. You're about to visit the local healer, wincing as he prescribes bloodletting for what's probably just hay fever. Let's ground this in history. Medieval medicine was a mix of herbal remedies, superstition, and guesswork, with barber surgeons handling everything from haircuts to amputations. Bloodletting, based on the theory of balancing bodily humors, was a go-to cure, often using leeches or lancets despite its dubious success rate. Here's the QWERTY tidbit. Some healers used urine charts, diagnosing illnesses by the color and taste, yes, taste, of a patient's pee. You're trudging to the barber surgeon now, clutching your cloak. Do you trust his cures, fake wellness, or just hope the sniffles pass? You step outside, the village air sharp and damp, making your nose drip worse. The barber surgeon's hut is near the square, marked by a red and white pole, medieval branding for blood and bandages. You pass the stalks, now empty. Beard guy must have survived his cabbage shower. Your head pounds with each step, and you're praying this is just dust from the fields, not the plague's opening act. The hut's door creaks open, and the surgeon, a wiry man with a stained apron, greets you with a grin that's more teeth than trust. "What ails ye?" he asks, eyeing you like you're a puzzle to slice open. Joke 1, you thought urgent care was sketchy? Try a doctor who moonlights as a barber. You mumble about your sniffles, and he ushers you inside. The hut smells of herbs, blood, and something you don't want to identify. Jars line the shelves, dried roots, murky liquids, and yep, a wriggling mass of leeches. He pokes your forehead, squints at your tongue, and declares your humors out of whack. Before you can protest, he's reaching for a leech, its slimy body glinting in the candlelight. "This'll fix ya," he says, plopping it on your arm. You flinch as it latches, a cold pinch that's somehow worse than the headache. Historians still argue whether bloodletting helped or harmed. Some say it relieved fevers, others call it a fast track to the graveyard. You're voting graveyard as a second leech joins the party. You grit your teeth, watching your blood vanish into the leech's greedy maw. The surgeon hums, sharpening a blade you hope isn't for you, and offers a foul-smelling herb pouch to cleanse your air. You take it, mostly to avoid more leeches, and sniff. Rotten eggs and mint, a combo that makes your eyes water. He charges a copper coin, but your pouch is empty from the market, so you promise to pay later. He grumbles, but leaves you, warning, no humors, no health. Joke 2, you thought copays were steep? Try owing a guy who thinks leeches are high-tech.
You stumble out, leeches detached but your arm throbbing. The sniffles persist, and you're not sure if you're cured or just traumatized. The village hums, someone's hammering, a dog barks, but you're too woozy to care. You head home, clutching the herb pouch, which smells worse than your unbathed self. Joke 3, you thought flu shots were bad? Try a cure where the prescription's a vampire worm. Your hovel's smoky promise calls, but the day's still got teeth, and you're wondering if survival means outrunning both plague and quacks. You're staggering back to your hovel, arms stinging from those leeches. Remember the barber surgeon's slimy cure? Your sniffles linger, and the herb pouch in your belt smells like it's plotting revenge alongside your fishy stew leftovers. The village is buzzing, but there's a new tension in the air, like a storm nobody's naming.
whispers of witchcraft are circling, and in the Middle Ages, one wrong word could spark a trial. You're about to whisper carefully, tiptoeing through a village where gossip is as deadly as the plague you've been dodging. Let's ground this in history. Witch hunts, though peaking later, were a real fear in the 14th century, with accusations often targeting women, outsiders, or anyone who seemed off. Trials were brutal. Think dunking in rivers or burning, fueled by superstition and social grudges. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some accused witches were tested with a needle. If a mark didn't bleed, it was a devil's sign, though prickers often used dull needles to rig the test. You're in the village now, ears sharp. What's your move? Stay silent, avoid eye contact, or pray you're not the odd one out. You pull your cloak, still muddy and lice-ridden, over your face, hoping to blend in. The square's alive with chatter. A woman's pointing at a neighbor's hovel, muttering about cursed milk and barren hens. You recognize her, turnip lady from the market, always quick with a glare. You sidestep, keeping your head down, but catch Potato Face's eye. He's leaning against a cart, looking nervous. "They're at it again," he whispers, nodding toward the crowd. You nod back, heart sinking. One false move, like that pebble tithe you slipped at church, and you could be next. Joke 1, you thought office rumors were bad? Try gossip that lands you in a bonfire. You weave through the crowd, aiming for your hovel. A man shouts, "She hexed my cow!" And you flinch, remembering the alewife's suspicious brew you drank. Was it too frothy? You're no witch, but logic doesn't win these fights. Historians still argue whether witch hunts were about fear of the supernatural or just settling scores. Some say they purged social deviance. Others think they were power grabs by churches or lords. You're just trying to avoid Turnip Lady's stare, her eyes narrowing like she's memorizing your face. You clutch your herb pouch, hoping it doesn't look like a spell kit. A priest, yup, the hawk-eyed one from Mass, appears, cross raised, calling for calm. The crowd quiets, but you feel exposed, your sniffles suddenly louder than a trumpet. You cough into your sleeve, praying it's not misread as a hex. A kid nearby giggles, pointing at your muddy shoes, still straw-stuffed and soggy. "Witch feet!" he yells, and your stomach drops. You force a laugh, muttering, "Just mud," and hurry on. The priest's gaze lingers, and you're sweating despite the chill. Joke 2, you thought a bad tweet was trouble? Try dodging a kid who thinks your shoes are satanic. You're almost home when you overhear two women whispering about a trial by water tomorrow. If the accused sinks, she's innocent, but drowns. If she floats, she's a witch and burns. You shudder, realizing survival here means more than dodging plague or bandits. It's about not being noticed. You slip into your hovel, bolting the door, and collapse by the cold fire pit. The herb pouch falls, spilling its stench, and you wonder if it's cursed after all. Joke 3, you thought jury duty was rough? Try a trial where the verdict's either wet or crispy. The village's whispers echo outside, and you're praying tomorrow doesn't put your name in the wrong mouths.
You're slumped in your hovel, the door bolted against the village's witch hunt whispers. Remember Turnip Lady's accusing glare? The air's thick with the stench of your herb pouch in that fishy stew, and your lice-ridden tunic, still itching like a grudge, makes every move a misery. The fire pit's cold, and night's falling fast, turning your hovel into a fridge. It's time to collapse onto your lumpy straw mattress, serenaded by snoring neighbors through walls thinner than medieval promises. Sleep's your only escape, but in the Middle Ages, even that's a gamble. Let's ground this in history. Medieval peasants slept on straw pallets or sacks, often shared with family or livestock for warmth, with little privacy. Hovels were one-room affairs. Sleep was vital but tough. Hunger, cold, and noise made rest fitful, and many worked from dawn to dusk. Here's the quirky tidbit.
Some believed sleeping with a knife under the pillow warded off evil spirits, a superstition that doubled as a handy defense against rats or worse. You're eyeing your mattress now, straw poking through like tiny spears. What's your plan? Fluff it, pray for warmth, or just give up and shiver? You drag the mattress closer to the fire pit, hoping last night's embers, remember that kindling struggle, might still hold a spark. No luck. It's ash and disappointment. The straw crunches under you, jabbing your ribs, and you're pretty sure a louse just threw a party in your hair. You wrap your cloak, damp and heavy, around you, but it's more holes than heat. The hovel's dark, save for a sliver of moonlight sneaking through the smoke hole, which also lets in a draft that's colder than the priest's stare. Joke 1, you thought a bad mattress was rough. Try sleeping on straw that's basically a medieval torture device. You lie down, wincing as the straw pokes harder, and pull the threadbare blanket over you. It smells like despair and last week's stew. Next door, Potato Face is snoring like he's sawing logs with his face, each grunt rattling your flimsy walls. You try to block it out, but the village isn't helping. A dog barks, a baby wails, and something skitters across your floor. Probably that rat still plotting to steal your leftovers. You clutch your lucky stone, minus the pebble you tithed, hoping it'll at least keep nightmares at bay. Historians still argue whether peasants slept deeply from exhaustion or barely at all due to discomfort. Some say they adapted, others think sleep deprivation was just life. You're voting for misery as your eyes refuse to close. You shift, trying to find a spot that doesn't stab, but the cold's creeping up your legs, and your straw-stuffed shoes left by the fire pit are too soggy to help. You remember that quirky knife-under-pillow trick and consider it, but your dull blade's more likely to cut you than any spirit. Instead, you tuck your hands under your armpits, curling into a ball. The snoring's now a duet. Another neighbor's joined in, turning your hovel into a symphony of wheezes. Joke 2, you thought noisy neighbors were bad. Try walls so thin you're basically bunking with the whole village. Your mind's racing, plague, bandits, witches, leeches, and sleep feels like a luxury you can't afford. You try counting sheep, but that just reminds you of the Lord's tithe in your struggling rye field. The hovel creaks, and you freeze, half expecting a bandit or a witch hunter. It's just the wind, but your heart's pounding. You're exhausted, body aching from plowing and dodging drama, yet the straw's winning this war. Joke 3, you thought insomnia was modern. Try dozing off when your bed's a porcupine and your life's a horror show. You close your eyes, praying for a few hours of peace before the Middle Ages throw another punch. You're tossing on your straw mattress, the sharp pricks and Potato Face's snoring. Remember that nighttime symphony? Keeping sleep just out of reach. The hovel's icy, your cloak barely a shield against the chill, and the faint stink of your herb pouch lingers like a bad memory. Dawn's hours away, but a new sound jolts you upright. The thud of horses and a clatter of metal outside. Armored knights are thundering through the village, their war bands pillaging without mercy. You're about to hide, heart racing, praying you're not their next target in this medieval free-for-all. Let's ground this in history. Roaming war bands, often knights or mercenaries, raided villages, especially during conflicts like the 100 Years' War. Peasants were easy prey, their homes looted for food, coin, or anything valuable, with lords offering little protection. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some knights left protection tokens, like a branded shield, to mark villages they'd spare, for a price, turning extortion into a side hustle. You're in your hovel now, ears straining. What's your move? Barricade the door, hide under the mattress, or peek and pray? You scramble to your knees, straw stabbing your palms, and crawl to the door. The wood's flimsy, more suggestion than barrier, and you wedge your clay pot, still greasy from that fishy stew, against it. It's not much, but it's something. Outside, shouts mix with the clank of armor and a horse's whinny. You press your eye to a crack in the wall, heart pounding. Shadows move in the moonlight, men in chainmail, swords glinting, rummaging through a neighbor's cart. You spot Potato Face's hovel, door ajar, and hope he's not playing hero. Joke 1, you thought home security was pricey? Try guarding your hovel with a pot and a prayer. You duck back, breath shallow, as a knight's voice barks orders. They're after grain, maybe ale. Your rye field's too far to tempt them, but your onions and leftover stew are fair game. You curse your empty coin pouch, nothing to bribe them with since the market cleaned you out. Historians still argue whether these raids were strategic or just opportunistic chaos. Some say warbands targeted rival lords' lands. Others think they hit any village too weak to fight back. You're definitely feeling the weak part as a crash echoes. Someone's hovel just lost a door. You consider hiding under the mattress, but the straw's too thin to fool anyone, and your lice-ridden tunic would probably give you away with one itch. Instead, you huddle by the fire pit, clutching your dull knife, more rust than threat, but it's all you've got. The shouts grow closer, and you hear a woman's cry, maybe turnip lady, caught in the wrong place. Your stomach twists. You're no fighter, just a peasant trying to survive the night. Joke 2, you thought a bad neighbor was trouble? Try one with a sword who wants your last onion. The hooves pause near your hovel, and you hold your breath, praying the clay pot holds. A knight mutters something about slim pickings, and the hooves move on, fading toward the village's edge. You exhale, trembling, but don't relax. Raids can circle back. You stay low, knife in hand, until the village falls silent, save for a dog's distant whimper. Your hovel's untouched, but the fear lingers, heavy as your muddy cloak. Joke 3, you thought a power outage was scary? Try hiding from knights who think taxes means take everything. You crawl back to the mattress, too wired to sleep, knowing the Middle Ages won't let you rest easy. You're crouched on your straw mattress, still clutching that rusty knife from the night's raid. Remember those thundering hooves? The village is quiet now, but your nerves are as frayed as your lice-ridden tunic, and the hovel's chill hasn't let up. Dawn's creeping in, painting the smoke hole gray, and with it comes a new dread, the Lord's taxman. You're about to fork over coins to a sneering collector, leaving you penniless in a world where survival's already a coin toss. Your empty pouch, gutted at the market, is about to make this day even bleaker. Let's ground this in history. Medieval peasants faced heavy taxes, often 10 to 50% of their crops or income, paid to lords, the church, or both, under the feudal system. Coin was scarce, so many paid in grain or labor, leaving little for themselves. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some taxmen used tally sticks, notched wood to track debts, split between lord and peasant as a crude receipt. Think medieval blockchain, but splintery. You're eyeing your hovel's meager stash now. What's your plan? Scrape together an offering, plead poverty, or hide like you did from the knights?
You ease off the mattress, straw jabbing your knees, and rummage through your chest. No coins, just a shriveled onion and that lucky stone, now pebbleless after your church tithe. The taxman's due at the square, and skipping isn't an option. The bailiff, yep, Mr. Stocks from the cabbage-throwing fiasco, has a memory like a trap. You grab the onion, hoping it's barter-worthy, and slip on your muddy cloak, wincing as the lice stage another revolt. Outside, the village stirs, but it's grim. Last night's raid left broken carts and sour faces. Joke 1, you thought filing taxes was bad? Try paying with veggies while dodging a pillory. You trudge to the square, where the taxman waits, a squat man with a ledger and a sneer that says he enjoys his job too much. Villagers line up, clutching sacks of grain or clucking hens. You spot Potato Face, handing over a small sack, his scowl deeper than usual. You step forward, onion in hand, and the taxman eyes it like you've offered a dead rat. Coin or crop, he snaps. You stammer about the raid, but he cuts you off. No excuses. Your heart sinks. You've got nothing but excuses and an onion.
Historians still argue whether taxes crushed peasant spirits or sparked quiet rebellions. Some say they fueled uprisings, others think folks just gritted their teeth. You're gritting now, hard. You offer the onion, voice low, and he laughs, a sound like gravel crunching. "Keep your weeds," he says, jotting in his ledger. He demands a copper by sundown, or the Lord'll have words. You nod, stomach twisting, knowing words mean stocks or worse. You back away, the onion feeling heavier than your empty pouch. A woman behind you, turnip lady, of course, mutters about deadbeats, and you resist the urge to chuck your onion at her. Joke 2, you thought debt collectors were tough? Try one who'd trade your freedom for a turnip. You slink back toward your hovel, mind racing. You could sell your knife, dull as it is, or beg Potato Face for a loan, but pride and fear stop you. The rye field's your only hope, but it's weeks from harvest, and the Lord's tithe will eat most of it anyway. You pass the well, still plague risky, and consider drinking your woes away with ale, but you're broke. The village feels like a trap, every eye judging your empty hands. Joke 3, you thought being broke was humbling? Try owing a lord who thinks your life's worth less than his horse. You reach your hovel, onion still in hand, and slump by the cold fire pit, wondering how to outrun a debt you can't pay. You're slumped by your hovel's cold fire pit, the weight of the taxman's sneer. Remember his coin or consequences threat? Pressing harder than the chill in your bones. Your lone onion, rejected like a bad Tinder match, sits in your lap, and your lice-ridden tunic itches worse than ever. A new pain's creeping in, sharp and relentless, a throbbing toothache that's turning your jaw into a medieval torture chamber. In the Middle Ages, there's no dentist, just a blacksmith with pliers or a barber surgeon with a grudge. You're about to grit through agony, praying you don't end up with a worse fix than the problem. Let's ground this in history. Medieval dental care was brutal, with toothaches treated by extraction, often by barbers or blacksmiths using crude tools. No anesthesia. Infections were common, and diets heavy in gritty bread, remember that moldy loaf, wore teeth down fast. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some peasants chewed on cloves or used tooth powders made from ash or herbs, believing they'd ward off pain, though they mostly just tasted like regret. You're clutching your jaw now, wincing. What's your move? Seek the barber surgeon again? Hunt for herbs? Or just suffer in silence? You stagger to your feet, the straw mattress still stabbing like tiny pitchforks, offering no comfort. The pain's a hot spike, pulsing with every heartbeat, and you're pretty sure your tooth's staging a coup. You rummage through your chest, hoping for a stray clove from your plague-dodging mint stash. Nothing but lint and that lucky stone, now feeling like a cosmic joke. The barber surgeon's hut tempts you, but after those leeches, you're not keen on his sequel. The blacksmith's another option, but his pliers look more suited to horseshoes than molars. Joke 1, you thought a root canal was bad? Try a dentist who doubles as a farrier. You step outside, the village gray under a drizzling sky. Each chew of imaginary food sends a jolt through your jaw, so you skip the onion and head for the forest path, bandit risks be damned, in search of herbs. You've heard whispers of willow bark for pain, but you're no botanist, and the trees all look like they're judging you. You spot a bush with familiar leaves, mint, maybe, and chew a handful, wincing as the juice hits your tooth like a betrayal. It's not willow, just a minty slap. Historians still argue whether folk remedies helped or just distracted from pain. Some say herbs had mild effects. Others call them placebo with a side of dirt. You're voting dirt as you spit out the leaves, pain unchanged. Back in the village, you pass Potato Face, who's mending a fence. He notices your grimace and offers, "Blacksmith'll yank it for a favor." You nod, dreading the barter, probably hauling his firewood for a week. The blacksmith's forge is near the square, its heat a stark contrast to your hovel's chill. He's a burly man, hammer in hand, pliers glinting on a bench. You point to your jaw, and he grunts, "Sit." No questions, no sympathy. Just a man who sees teeth as nails to pull. You brace yourself, gripping a stool as he leans in, breath like old ale. Joke 2, you thought dental appointments were scary. Try one where the drill's a guy named Rolf. The pliers clamp your tooth, and you see stars. Pain explodes, then fades as the tooth pops free, blood trickling. He spits in the dirt, tossing the molar aside like it's trash. You're dizzy, jaw sore but relieved, until he says, "Owe me a day's labor." You nod, too weak to argue, and stumble home, spitting blood. The village hums, someone's shouting about a lost goat, but you're done. Joke 3, you thought braces were a hassle? Try a checkup that costs a week of your life. You collapse in your hovel, toothless but alive, wondering if the Middle Ages will ever cut you a break. You're sprawled in your hovel, jaw throbbing from the blacksmith's plier-wrenching dental work. Remember that tooth-yanking ordeal? Blood still on your tongue, and your lice-ridden tunic itches like it's celebrating your misery. The taxman's threat looms, your onions worthless, and the hovel's colder than a lord's heart. Now you've got to navigate feudal law, bowing to a lord who could ruin you for breathing wrong. You're about to shuffle to his manor, hoping your existence doesn't annoy him into tossing you in the stocks, or worse. Let's ground this in history. Feudalism defined medieval life, with lords holding near absolute power over serfs like you, who owed labor, crops, and loyalty in exchange for protection. Disobeying could mean fines, eviction, or public punishment. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some lords demanded bizarre dues, like a yearly gift of eels or a dance at harvest festivals, humiliation as rent. You're heading to the manor now, tax debt gnawing at you. What's your approach? Grovel, explain your poverty, or pray he's in a good mood? You drag yourself up, straw mattress jabbing your back, and pull on your muddy cloak, still damp from yesterday's drizzle. Your straw-stuffed shoes squelch as you step outside, the village gray and sullen. The manor's a mile off, a stone hulk that dwarfs your hovel. You trudge along, passing the rye field you plowed, its sprouts mocking your empty pouch. A neighbor, turnip lady, naturally, glares as you pass, probably still sour about deadbeats. You keep your head down, jaw aching, and try not to look like trouble. Joke 1, you thought dealing with a boss was tough? Try a lord who thinks you're furniture. The manor's gate looms, guarded by a surly man with a spear and a stare that says, "Don't waste my time." You mutter about the taxman's summons, and he waves you through, grumbling. Inside, the hall's a mix of opulence and grime. Tapestries hang beside smoky walls, and the lord's on a raised chair, picking at a roast you'd kill for. The taxman's there, ledger open, pointing at you like you're a math problem he hates. You bow low, nearly kissing the floor, and stammer about the raid that left you broke. The lord barely looks up, waving a hand like you're a fly. Historians still argue whether lords saw peasants as people or just resources. Some say they cared about loyalty. Others think you were cogs in their wealth machine. You're feeling cog-like as the taxman snaps, "Coin by tomorrow, or it's the stocks."
You try explaining. Raids, no coins, a yanked tooth. But the lord yawns, and the taxman cuts you off. "Labor, then," he says. "Fix the manor's fence, dawn to dusk." You nod, relief mixing with dread. A day's work beats the stocks, but your body's already screaming from plowing and pain. The lord finally glances at you, eyes cold, and mutters, "Don't test me again." You back out, bowing, heart pounding. Joke 2, you thought a performance review was bad. Try one where failure means a wooden cage. You stumble back to the village, the manor's shadow lingering. The fence job's tomorrow, but tonight's just you, a cold hovel, and that useless onion. You pass the square where the stocks stand empty, too close a call.
A kid kicks a stone, yelling, "Tax dodger!" You ignore him, too tired for shame. Joke 3. You thought overtime was rough? Try working for a lord who'd trade your soul for a splinter. You reach your hovel, collapsing by the fire pit, wondering if feudal law's just a fancy name for survive or else. The day's done, but tomorrow's already sharpening its claws. You're slumped by your hovel's fire pit, the lord's cold stare. Remember that "don't test me" warning? Still burning in your mind. Your jaws sore from the blacksmith's pliers, your tunic's a lice festival, and the promise of fence-fixing labor for the taxman feels like a sentence. The air's heavy, not just with the usual stew and straw stink, but with a storm's threat. Dark clouds are rolling in, and in the Middle Ages, bad weather isn't just an inconvenience, it's a crop killer. You're about to brace for floods, knowing one downpour could drown your rye field and your hopes. Let's ground this in history. Medieval agriculture was at the mercy of weather, with floods or droughts often tipping villages into famine. Poor drainage and basic tools meant fields could turn to swamps overnight, ruining harvests peasants like you depended on. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some villagers performed rain dances or offered prayers to saints like Saint Medard to stop storms, believing divine intervention could outsmart a cloud. You're eyeing the sky now, your field in mind. What's your move? Check the crops, pray for mercy, or start digging a ditch? You grab your cloak, still muddy and useless against rain, and step outside. The village is tense. Neighbors are hauling buckets or tying down carts, their faces as grim as the sky. Your straw-stuffed shoes squelch as you hurry to your field, the wind already whipping your face. The rye's sprouting, green but fragile, and you can almost hear it begging for a break. You spot Potato Face nearby, piling stones to divert water. "Storm's comin'," he grunts. "Save what you can." You nod, heart sinking. Your field's low-lying, a flood magnet. Joke 1. You thought a rainy day was cozy? Try one that wipes out your groceries for a year. You kneel, inspecting the furrows you plowed, still uneven thanks to that cursed ox. Water's already pooling in spots, and you grab a stick to dig a crude trench, hoping to steer runoff away. Your hands, blistered from plowing and kindling, scream in protest, but you keep going, mud caking your fingers. The sky growls, and a fat raindrop smacks your neck, then another. You work faster, but the soil's turning to sludge, mocking your efforts. Historians still argue whether peasants could outsmart bad weather or just endured its wrath. Some say ditches and crop rotation helped. Others think nature always won. Your team nature sucks as the rain picks up. You glance at the village, where turnip lady's praying by a makeshift shrine, muttering to some saint. You're tempted to join her, your lucky stone's not pulling its weight. But you've got no candles or offerings, just a soggy onion in your belt. The ditch is shallow, barely a defense, and you realize your rye's fate is out of your hands. A crack of thunder makes you jump, and you scramble back to the village, dodging puddles that smell like regret. Joke 2. You thought an umbrella was enough? Try saving a harvest with a stick and a dream. Your hovel's no sanctuary. Rain's already dripping through the thatch, plinking into your fire pit. You shove your straw mattress to a drier corner, but it's soaked, straw turning to mush. The field's probably a swamp by now, and with it, your chance to pay the Lord's tithe. You huddle under your cloak, shivering as the storm roars outside. Joke 3. You thought a weather app was handy. Try predicting a flood when your forecasts pray harder. The village is battening down, but you're out of moves, left to hope the rain spares enough rye to keep you from starvation's edge. You're shivering in your hovel, the storm's relentless drumming. Remember that flood threatening your rye, turning your thatch roof into a leaky sieve? Water pools on the dirt floor, and your straw mattress is now a soggy sponge, mocking your need for rest. Your lice-ridden tunic clings like a wet grudge, and the taxman's labor debt looms as heavy as the clouds. The village is hunkered down, but whispers still slither through the walls. It's time to join the gossip, swapping rumors in a desperate bid to stay connected, or at least not become the next scandal's target. Let's ground this in history. Medieval villages thrived on gossip, a social glue that shared news, warned of danger, or settled scores. Rumors could spark witch hunts or shunnings, especially in tight-knit communities where everyone knew your business. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some villages had gossip benches, communal seats where folks traded tales, often under the guise of mending or weaving. Think medieval group chats, but with more mud. You're itching to know what's brewing now. Do you visit a neighbor, eavesdrop, or keep your head down? You wrap your sodden cloak tighter, wincing as water trickles down your neck, and crack the door. The rain's eased to a drizzle, but the village is a muddy mess, carts stuck, dogs sulking. You spot Potato Face by his hovel, patching a wall with straw and curses. He's safe enough, so you slog over, shoes squelching, still straw-stuffed and now waterlogged. Heard anything, you ask, keeping it vague. He grunts, nodding toward the square. They're blaming old Meg for the storm, say she cursed the sky. Your stomach twists. You remember those witch hunt whispers. Joke 1. You thought water cooler talk was bad? Try gossip that gets someone burned for bad weather. You lean closer, keeping your voice low. Potato Face spills more. Meg's been brewing odd-smelling potions, and Turnip Lady, yep, her again, swears her cow stopped milking after Meg passed by. You're no fan of Meg's, but you know how fast rumors spiral. You mutter about the storm ruining your rye, hoping to shift the topic. He nods, saying the bailiff's sniffing around for tax dodgers. Great, another reminder of your debt. Historians still argue whether gossip strengthened village bonds or just sowed chaos. Some say it shared vital info. Others think it fueled paranoia and betrayal. You're feeling the paranoia as you glance at Turnip Lady's hovel, half expecting her to point at you next. Potato Face offers you a seat on a log, close enough to a gossip bench, and you squat, mud seeping into your hose. He whispers about a night's raid hitting a nearby village, worse than the one you hid from. You nod, adding you saw a notched tree in the forest, maybe a bandit's mark. His eyes widen, gossip's currency, and you're rich for a moment. But you're careful not to mention your pebble tithe or tooth-yanking debt. Too much sharing could make you the next Meg. Joke 2. You thought oversharing online was risky? Try spilling secrets when the wrong ear means stocks. A kid splashes by, yelling about a drowned goat, and you both pause, listening for more. The village feels like a pot ready to boil over. Storm, taxes, witches. You're tempted to ask about Meg's potions, but a shadow moves nearby. Turnip Lady, carrying a basket, her glare sharp enough to cut. You clamp up, nodding politely, and she moves on. Potato Face mutters, "Watch yourself, she's got a nose for trouble." You agree, heart thudding, and stand to leave. Joke 3. You thought dodging drama was hard? Try surviving a village where every whisper's a loaded crossbow. You trudge back, gossip swirling in your head, praying your name stays out of the rumor mill.
You're sloshing back to your hovel. The village's gossip, remember Meg's cursed storm, buzzing in your ears like a swarm of lice from your ever-itching tunic. The drizzle stopped, but your cloak's a soggy weight, and the mud's turned your straw-stuffed shoes into swamp creatures. The storm's damage is clear. Your rye field's likely a puddle, and the taxman's labor debt waits like a noose. Hunger's gnawing again, worse than ever, and winter's shadow looms. You're about to face starvation, tightening your belt and wondering if your pantry, aka that lone onion, will outlast the cold. Let's ground this in history. Medieval famines were frequent, with bad harvests or storms often leaving villages on the brink. Peasants stored grain or dried vegetables, but reserves rarely lasted through winter, and lords still demanded tithes. Here's the quirky tidbit.
Some turned to famine foods like tree bark or nettles, boiled into soups that were more desperation than nutrition. Think medieval foraging gone wrong. You're eyeing your hovel's meager stash now. What's your plan? Ration the onion, scavenge the forest, or beg a neighbor? You push open the door, the familiar stink of damp straw and old stew hitting you. The fire pit's cold, your straw mattress a wet mess from the leaky roof. You check your pantry, a shelf with that shriveled onion, a crust of moldy bread, yep, that breakfast relic, and a scrap of fishy stew gone slimy. Your stomach growls, unimpressed by the options. You grab the onion, slicing it with your rusty knife, still dull from gutting fish, and chew a piece, its bitter sting barely food. Joke 1. You thought dieting was tough? Try a meal plan where the main course is regret. You consider the forest for nettles or berries, but the bandit carved tree and last night's night raid make you hesitate. Starving's bad, but getting robbed, or worse, in the woods isn't a trade you're ready for. You eye the bread, its green patches glowing in the dim light. You scrape off the mold, remembering that quirky tale about peasants eating it for health. It's a risk, but so's everything here. You nibble a corner, gagging at the stale grit, and pray it doesn't spark a gut revolt. Historians still argue whether famine pushed peasants to ingenuity or just despair. Some say they adapted with wild plants. Others think hunger broke spirits before bodies. You're feeling broken as the bread sticks in your throat. You're tempted to knock on Potato Face's door. Maybe he's got a spare turnip. But gossip's made you wary, and owing more favors feels like digging a deeper hole. The village is quiet, everyone hoarding what's left after the storm. You tighten your belt, a leather strap that's more holes than hide, and try to ignore the hunger pangs. The Lord's fence job tomorrow might earn a scrap of bread, but that's a big might. You huddle by the fire pit, too weak to relight it, and stare at the onion's remains. Joke 2. You thought skipping lunch was hard? Try skipping winter with a vegetable and a dream. A rat, your old breakfast nemesis, scuttles across the floor, eyeing your bread crust. You shoo it, clutching your sad meal, but it's bold, darting closer. You toss a pebble, your lucky stone's last survivor, and it retreats, for now. The hovel's silence is heavy, broken only by a distant dog's howl. You're not just hungry, you're scared. Winter's coming, and your field's ruin means no harvest to barter. Joke 3. You thought grocery shopping was stressful? Try surviving when your fridge is a shelf and your budget's hope. You curl up, hunger gnawing, praying the Middle Ages don't starve you before something else does. You're curled up in your hovel, hunger gnawing like a rat. Speaking of which, that crust-stealing rodent is probably plotting its comeback. The onion's gone, your moldy bread's a bad memory, and your lice-ridden tunic itches worse than the fear of starvation. The storms left your rye field a swamp, and the taxman's labor debt looms like a vulture. The village feels like it's holding its breath, and you're out of tricks. It's time to pray for mercy, clinging to hope and begging divine intervention for your endless woes, because in the Middle Ages, faith's often all you've got left.
Let's ground this in history. Religion permeated medieval life, with peasants turning to prayer for everything from harvests to health. Churches and saints were seen as direct lines to God, and villagers often made offerings, candles, food, or labor to sway divine favor. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some prayed to St. Anthony for lost items, believing he'd bargain with demons to return a missing hoe or hen. Saints as medieval lost and found clerks. You're in your hovel now, desperation heavy. What's your move? Pray alone, visit the church, or make an offering you can't afford? You shift on the soggy straw mattress, still a prickly nightmare, and glance at the fire pit, cold as your prospects. Your lucky stone, now just a pebble-less lump, feels useless, but you clutch it anyway, a makeshift relic. The church is tempting, but it's a muddy trek, and the priest's hawk eyes, remember Mass, make you nervous after that pebble tithe fiasco. You decide to pray here, kneeling on the dirt floor, which is more puddle and ground. You whisper for mercy, save the rye, ease the hunger, keep the taxman at bay. Your voice cracks, and you're not sure if it's faith or fear talking. Joke 1, you thought a bad Wi-Fi signal was frustrating? Try praying when the hotline to heaven's on hold. You close your eyes, picturing St. Medard, that storm stopper turnip lady prayed to. Maybe he'll take pity on your drowned field. You promise a candle if you survive winter, knowing you've got no wax or coin to back it up. The hovel's quiet, save for a drip from the leaky thatch, and you wonder if God's listening or if the Middle Ages just enjoy watching you squirm. Historians still argue whether prayer gave peasants strength or just false hope. Some say it unified communities, others think it was a crutch for a brutal world. You're leaning crutch as your stomach growls, louder than your pleas. You're tempted to trek to the church for a proper prayer, but the village is a mire, and you're too weak to dodge turnip lady's gossip or the bailiff's glare. Instead, you fish out a mint leaf from your plague-dodging stash, your last one, and place it by the fire pit as a sad offering. It's not a candle, but it's all you've got, and maybe St. Anthony will take it for your lost harvest. You mumble another prayer, asking for a miracle, like a sack of grain or a taxman with amnesia. Joke 2, you thought bargaining with a car salesman was tough? Try cutting a deal with a saint for a crust of bread. The prayer ends, but the hovel feels no warmer, no holier. Outside, a neighbor's coughing, plague vibes again, and you wonder if your sniffles, post-leeches, are back. You're too tired to care, too hungry to move. The mint leaf sits there, mocking your faith, and you collapse back onto the mattress, straw jabbing like divine punishment. Joke 3, you thought meditation was calming? Try praying when your stomach's singing the blues and your roof's a sieve. You close your eyes, clinging to a sliver of hope, praying tomorrow doesn't break what's left of you. You're slumped on your soggy straw mattress, the echo of your desperate prayer, remember that mint leaf offering, fading into the hovel's damp gloom. The lice in your tunic are still partying, your jaw throbs from the blacksmith's pliers, and the taxman's fence-fixing debt hangs like a storm cloud. The village is silent, save for the occasional drip through your leaky thatch, and hunger's carved a hole in you deeper than the Middle Ages' endless grind. It's night now, and you're about to drift off, wondering if tomorrow's medieval gauntlet will finally break you. Sleep's your last refuge, but even that's a gamble. Let's ground this in history. Medieval peasants lived on the edge, with survival hinging on crops, weather, and lord's whims. Sleep was their only respite, yet hunger, cold, and fear often stole it, leaving them to face another day of labor and risk. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some believed dreaming of bread meant good fortune, a cruel irony when your pantry's just a memory of an onion. You're curling up now, straw jabbing your ribs. What's your final act? Relight the fire? Pray one more time? Or just surrender to the dark?
You tug your cloak, more holes than warmth, over you, shivering as the hovel's chill bites deeper. The fire pit's dead, and you're too drained to wrestle with kindling again. Those bandit-haunted forest trips feel like a lifetime ago. You shift, trying to dodge the mattress's sharpest straws, but it's like lying on a porcupine with a grudge. Potato Face's snores rumble through the wall, a reminder you're never alone, even in misery. You clutch your lucky stone, its weight a faint comfort, and close your eyes, willing sleep to come. Joke 1, you thought a sleepless night was bad? Try dozing when your bed's a torture rack and your life's a cliffhanger. Your mind churns, flooded fields, witch whispers, leech scars, each memory a jab keeping sleep at bay. You try picturing that dreamed-of bread, hoping for a sliver of medieval luck, but all you see is the moldy crust you choked down. Historians still argue whether peasants found solace in sleep or just collapsed from exhaustion. Some say dreams offered escape, Others think nightmares mirrored their waking woes. Your team nightmares, as a rat, yep, that breakfast thief, scuttles across the floor, its claws a tiny taunt. You don't bother shooing it, you're too tired to fight. The hovel creaks, wind sneaking through the walls, and you pull the blanket tighter, its mildew scent now oddly familiar. You think of Turnip Lady's gossip, the Lord's cold eyes, the storm's ruin. Yet here you are, still breathing, still hoping. Sleep creeps closer, heavy and slow, like a fog rolling over your battered body. You murmur one last plea, not to a saint, but to the dark itself. Just a few hours, no raids, no hunger. Joke 2, you thought counting sheep was soothing? Try counting worries when they all wear armor or fangs. Your eyes flutter, the hovel blurring. The straw's sting fades, and Potato Face's snores soften to a distant hum. You're slipping away, the Middle Ages wait lifting for a moment, and you wonder if dawn will bring a miracle or just another fight. Joke 3, you thought hitting snooze was a luxury? Try dreaming when survival's your alarm clock. The world softens now, the hovel's edges melting into a gentle haze. The straw beneath you feels less sharp, the cold less cruel, as your breath slows, deep and even. The village fades, no lords, no storms, no whispers, just a quiet hum, like a blanket settling over you. You're safe here, in this moment, where hunger can't reach and taxes don't bite. Let the day's weight slip away, carried off by the night's embrace. Your eyelids grow heavy, the dark a warm cocoon, and you sink deeper, cradled by the promise of rest. Tomorrow's worries can wait, for now there's only peace, whispering you toward dreams. Sleep, sweet listener, and let the Middle Ages drift into silence.